Welcome to this relatively short video about extinction. I just want to run through a variety of reasons that species might become extinct and just give you one or two examples where this might have possibly happened. Now, the first one is if we have the introduction of a new disease. If the species in question doesn't have time to adjust to this new disease, then it can decimate the whole population of that species. One example is the Dutch elm tree, which has been affected by something called Dutch elm disease, which is a fungus which eventually ends up killing the tree. And while it hasn't actually made the species extinct, it has had a massive impact on the numbers of this particular kind of tree. The second example I want to go through is this idea of new predators, and the example I'm going to share with you is the dodo. This is a bird that lived on the island of Mauritius, and around about the 17th century humans came along to this island and populated it, but what they brought along with them were their pets, and they also, probably by accident, but they also introduced rats as well, and a combination of humans hunting this bird and the rats eating the eggs wiped out the species in a very short amount of time. Another example is if you have a new competitor, and a classic example, they often like choosing this example in exams, but the example is of the red squirrel. And the red squirrel is native to the UK, but in recent times another species has been introduced, and this is called the grey squirrel. And grey squirrels are a little bit better adapted. They reproduce much more quickly, they are a little bit more aggressive, and a variety of other reasons they have managed to outcompete the red squirrel for food and space, and this has now become restricted to much smaller parts of the UK. Another reason for possible extinction is environmental change, and the example here is the woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth was well equipped to deal with cold environments, but a change in the climate over a relative short period of time, when I say short period of time, not just over a couple of summers or winters, but over a few hundred years or so, the climate managed to change, and in geographical terms that's quite a short amount of time, and the mammoth didn't actually have time to adjust to that, and that contributed to the reduction in numbers, along with one or two other things. The last thing here is if there is a catastrophe. This is supposed to be a diagram of an impact crater from an asteroid, but in the Earth's history, scientists believe that there have been some major impacts with asteroids, possibly 4 or 5 times, and each time they've caused a reduction in the number of species. The major one, or the most famous one that we talk about, is the impact of an asteroid that scientists believe wiped out the dinosaurs, which was about 65 million years ago. But it could also, apart from asteroid impact, it could also be volcanoes and maybe earthquakes, which might destroy habitats and therefore any species that might be living there. So these are the key ones that we look at. There is one other one that is related to the cyclical nature of speciation, and this is to do with how species change, and we'll look at this in a bit more detail in another video. But here is a species of fish which I've worked or used before in another video, and over time this can adapt and change into a whole different species, but in this case it's branched off into 2 different species, and at this point here this original species no longer lives. It's developed into 2 other species, so in a way I suppose you could suggest that was the extinction of the species. So that's an overview of how extinction can possibly work, and you should be able to work with those examples even if it means applying it to an unfamiliar species or an unfamiliar context.